This was published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, or
PNAS. Very cool.
Hello and welcome to Because Language, a show about linguistics, the science of language. My name's Daniel Midgley. With me now, my co-host, linguist, and friend, Hedvig Kiergaard. Hey, Hedvig.
Hello. Yes, we are friends.
Yes, we are.
I'm proud to say that.
Aw, thank you. You know, I feel a little bit bad, though, because...
Why?
I've been bothering Hedvig a bit with my intros because I tend to give these very showbiz intros. Like, hey, she's awesome and smart and funny and she's the greatest ever. And that bugs you.
It does bug me. Where do you get that showbiz thing from? Is it just the American-ness?
I don't know. Probably years of watching game shows as a kid. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
So, here's what I want to say for this intro. Hedvig is smart sometimes and not other times, but that's okay too. She's awesome sometimes and likable sometimes and funny sometimes, but not other times. But no matter what Hedvig is at any given time, we just like her a lot.
Oh, thank you. I like being liked.
How's that?
I like that a lot, and I like you too. And I can recommend if you are often saying "I love you" to someone in your life, like your spouse or your kids or something, try alternating like every fifth one with "I like you."
Oh, really?
Yeah. I can recommend it.
There's one thing that I noticed that I do with my partner, and that is I just thank her a lot for various things.
I know, you thank everyone all the time.
Well, hey, you know, gratitude is a very important ingredient for relationships, and I think maybe that's worth doing.
Mm-hmm,
a lot. Yeah. All right, that's enough of that.
Mm-hmm.
Ben is not with us. Ben is wearing his teacher hat, and so he is doing his teacherly duties at this moment. Mm-hmm. He's not with us this time, but he will be joining us in future episodes.
And we still like him.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
But you know what?
What?
Even if we didn't, he'd still be a worthwhile person.
If we didn't like him.
Even if we didn't particularly care for him, or if nobody liked him, that would not change his intrinsic value as a human.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Sorry. I see what you mean. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Yes.
We're changing to a relationships and psychology podcast.
Even though
but it's all
neither
language.
of us know anything about that.
Well, let's talk instead about what's coming up on this episode.
Yes.
On the show, we've often talked about gender and language. We've talked about how some words tend to lean toward being applied to women. Some words tend to lean toward being applied to men. Words like feisty and hysterical.
Handsome.
Right. Well, we're talking to an author who's done some pretty hefty historical analysis on the words we use for women in English, for women's occupations, women's bodies, women's lives. And so we're going to be talking to Dr. Jenni Nuttall. She's the author of Mother Tongue, The Surprising History of Women's Words. Looking forward to that, Hedvig?
That is neat. Yeah, I am. I think there's a lot of nuance and complex things that studying words can tell us about societies at different points in time. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I think it deserves some interrogation, some analysis, and seeing it from the broad historical perspective, like from the year 400 till today, I think we're going to find some worthwhile things.
Yeah.
Our latest episode was a bonus episode. It was a mailbag. We talked about three-letter acronyms, or TLAs.
Oh, yeah.
Are there really a lot of them, and why?
I forgot how many letters there are in the English alphabet, because I don't care.
And then we made a promo out of it, and it was really fun.
We made a promo, and all of my family and everyone thought it was really funny and was like, that's really you. It's like, right, well.
Hey, it's actually not a straightforward question, you know? We also talked about anagrams that are also synonyms. I liked rowdies and weirdos, but there were lots of others.
Mm-hmm. You amazed me and Ben by the algorithm by which you found them.
Yeah, well, it was just a perfectly ordinary hashing algorithm, which is a term that I know. If
you think Daniel is smart, then listen to become a patron, listen to the special episode, and you will hear, according to me and Ben are in agreement, the smartest thing we've ever seen you do.
Oh my God. Why is that the smartest thing? That's like any programmer would be like, well, if that's the best he can do, then he must be pretty crap in other ways.
No.
Which is true.
No, you underestimate how smart that was.
Okay.
So
if you want to hear our bonus episodes the minute they come out, then become a patron at the listener level. You'll be supporting the show and keeping us going, and you'll get various goodies at the various levels. Mail-outs, shout-outs, and every patron gets to hang out with us on our Discord server and join us on our live episodes. Speaking of which,
we have one coming up in a time sphere that makes sense for people in the Americas.
we've never done that before.
We've never done that before.
Because it sucks for Europeans.
Because I live in Europe and Daniel and Ben and a lot of other people live in Australia. So we've been focusing on those two time zones, which has often meant that the people in the Americas it's not fitting for them. So we're going to instead optimize for Australia and the Americas. And fuck Euros.
And which means that Hedvig will join us, if she's awake.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll to be fair, Friday night I stayed up until 4:30 to submit a paper.
Oh, gross.
Because the platform submission system was driving me bonkers.
Oh no, that's a really bad system.
Yes.
Oof.
Yes, it could use some Daniel magic.
This one's a potluck episode. Our listeners will be suggesting their favorite stories and words and talking on air and giving their comments and hanging out with us. So check your Patreon account to find out when that is. And if you're not a patron, please become one at patreon.com/becauselangpod. Big thanks, big love to all of our patrons.
Indeed.
Okay, you ready for some news?
I am.
Let's hit the news.
This is morning for me. I have my coffee. I've listened to my Swedish news. I've listened a bit to my Australian news. And now I'm ready for my linguistics news.
All right, here we go. What do you know about child-directed speech? We've talked about this a number of times.
I know that it's not the same all over the world.
True.
I know that there are companies that try and capitalize and extort money from anxious parents by selling them products to that claim to improve children's language learning. True. And that some of those products maybe work, and some of them just don't. I know that people have, as with a lot of things parenting, I know that people have a lot of opinions and like to share those opinions with new parents.
Yes, they do. Yes.
Which is not always helpful. Like, you should not speak baby talk to your children. You should speak to them like adults and blah, blah, blah.
Baby talk is great. Baby talk helps children.
Also, it's fine. Just don't butt into other people's parenting unless they're like actively, skewering their child over a fire. Probably.
If they're doing the forbidden experiment, then, or, language deprivation is no joke, by the way, especially for deaf children who do suffer language deprivation because every child deserves language, a language that they have access to. So this is no joke. But back to child-directed speech. We know that parents, but also people who aren't even parents.
Mm-hmm. I am not a parent.
At least in some places, speak a certain special way to children. They speak, let's go down the list. Slower, louder, more nouns.
Shorter words, fewer words that are repeated more often. Like not a lot of synonyms for the same thing. Melody, a bit, people call it engaging, like a bit up and down, like, ooh.
Exaggerated intonational contour. Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, and what else do people usually say? Well, it's often coupled, like, in practice, it's also coupled by facial gestures and gaze and stuff. That's quite intense.
Yeah, and children use that when they're interpreting utterances as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we hit the main points there. The idea is that this is how caregivers structure language in a simplified way that, in theory, allows children to grip onto language, to be able to understand it better. And then once they've learned some bits, they can start chaining those bits together and grow a language. So that's the idea behind child-directed speech. But Hedvig, as you mentioned, there are some cultures where adults don't do any child-directed speech because I'll talk to you when you've learned a language and you're worth talking to.
And in the meantime, you can talk to your peers. And my theory that I am at some point going to convince someone to give me funding for is that children, when they talk to younger children, do child-directed speech.
They're still getting child-directed speech from their peers.
I think so, actually.
Yep. Yeah. I think so too. Well, let's find out. But let's get away from the world of people for a little while, because there is apparently another animal that uses something like child-directed speech. And it's bottlenose dolphins.
I did glance at the run sheet and see this, and I know that I'm interested in this. I know that human interest in dolphin has a complicated history. There were many experiments in the 60s and 70s where people believed that dolphins were, enlightened creatures that knew the wisdom of the universe and tried to teach them English and did a lot of weird things. I also know that dolphins are not as cute and friendly as they may seem. They can bully each other and they can be violent.
Yes. They're not the playful critters that they seem to be.
Right. They are also social creatures that move in groups. And they rear their own young. Like, they hang out with their kids, which not all animals do. Right? Some animals are just like, you're out of my body, fuck off, I never want to see you again.
Turtles. It's like, I've laid the egg. We're done here.
Yeah.
Right?
Or some creatures are even like, you're out of my body. I'm going to eat some of you.
Bears.
And then fuck off.
Bear dads. Yep. It's nature's rough. I tell you what. Okay, so let's not take this, dolphins have language thing off a cliff. What we usually do is we say, well, hey, there's something interesting going on brain-wise or social-wise that shows the buddings of language or the makings of communication or communality as it showed up in other animals, and that's kind of interesting.
Right. And
that's the direction that I want to take this.
And as soon as we find another animal that is asocial and spends time with their young and uses some sort of signaling, some sort of communication system, be that language or not, as long as they rely on usually auditory signals to do things in their group, we would expect them to try and teach their children that. So what do dolphins do?
So this is work from Dr. Laila Saig from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and team. This was published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, or
PNAS. Very cool.
The team selected 19 females. Some of the females had calves sometimes and no calves at other times. They examined the whistles and squeaks when the calves weren't around and when they were. And they found that all 19 mother dolphins produced higher frequency whistles when in the presence of their calves than when alone. Shall we listen?
Yes. Oh my God, we can listen?
Yes, we can.
I didn't know we were going to listen to stuff. I'm very excited now.
So this is one when the calf is not around. Ready? Go. So you'll hear that it goes whoop-a-doop-a-doop.
Yeah.
But now, let's listen to one when the calf is around.
Okay.
Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. That one went way, way up. Now, these are slowed down a little bit so that we can hear them. It's not in real time. But you can hear that the one when the calf was around was a lot higher. It's whoop-de-doop-de-doo.
Wow.
All right. And all the moms did it when the calves were around and not so much when the calves weren't.
The calves are smaller as well, right?
They are smaller critters, yes.
Okay. So the calves might make higher pitched sounds because they're smaller.
I don't know. Maybe they have smaller ears that are better for higher frequencies. Or, for me, I've lost the ability to hear higher frequencies because I have children. But it appears that, in the words of the team, our data provide an example of convergent evolution of motherese in a non-human mammal and support the hypothesis that motherese can facilitate vocal learning and bonding in non-humans as well as humans. Hedwig, what do you think?
I'm thinking if those conclusions are entirely justified. Maybe they are. I mean, if all motherese or baby-directed speech or whatever you want to call it, if all that is a social being doing something different with their auditory signal while the offspring is of a certain age in order to facilitate them learning the signals, then it seems like they've found that in dolphins.
Seems that way. And remember, the propositional content could be nothing more than I am here, I am here, I am here.
Yeah. But that's fine. I mean, whatever they're doing with their signaling system, they have done something to it because they're speaking to a child.
One problem I'm having is that this is one aspect. Intonational contour is one aspect of child-directed speech in humans, but there's a lot more in humans. This team has found one thing. I don't mind that. What I did mind is, like, when I actually listened to the sound, they were a bit higher, but I mean, so I hope they haven't read the paper. And when I looked at the spectrograms, I wanted to know, like, where are the mean frequencies of the pitch and blah, 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 blah. I know.
And I'm assuming that the paper actually contains that stuff. I don't care that it's only one thing. I mean, the dolphin signaling system doesn't have that many variables to screw around with. Yeah, right?
That's true. But to say, well, we found something that is, I think we could say we have found one thing that is analogous to child-directed speech in humans, but not other things. I mean, it's a lot to hang the whole thing on, so I wouldn't want to, go over it. Once again, wouldn't want to take this to the edge.
I disagree.
But it is interesting. Oh, okay.
Because there are things about human speech that don't have an equivalent in dolphin signaling systems. So why would that thing, if all baby-directed speech is a modification of your system for babies,
then we found it.
The fact that it's not modified in the same way for humans and dolphins, like, why would it be?
No, that's true. Well, I like this a lot because
I like it too.
I'm always fascinated when you find some kind of commonality like this between humans and non-human animals. Because what you found is either something that goes back to primitive hardware that would eventually become language in us, or you found something about how communication works generally.
Right. Exactly. I was just going to say that. There's this, like, the convergent evolution thing. I'm just like, maybe it's an emergent property of, like, if you're a social being and you use auditory signals, you're probably going to stumble on this solution sooner or later. Which sort of, I guess, is what convergent evolution is.
That's so functionalist of you.
Yes! I am functionalist in many ways, not just whatever linguists believe. Yeah.
Me too. Okay, cool. Let's go on to our next story. We've talked before about trying to do science not in English. Do you remember the percentage of scientific research that is done in English?
No, but I remember us talking about this, and I mean, it's really high, right?
Is really high. It's like something like 95% according to some estimates. And we did an ancient episode of Because Language, one of those rare solo episodes, with Michael Gordon and his book Scientific Babel, which talks about why English has become the dominant language. But of course, there is a cost. There are researchers who have to take some of the time that they would be doing in research, and they have to partition that off and use some of that to learn English, which is something that people who are scientists who are proficient in English just simply don't have to do.
Yeah, there's a cost we have to pay that you don't have to pay. Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of not fair. Well, this is an attempt to quantify just how much extra difficulty there is. This is work from Tatsuya Amano and a team in PLOS Biology, which is PLOS a better acronym than PNAS?
I don't know what PLOS stands for. And I've published in PLOS.
Hey, wait a minute. Is it one of those things where it's like GPT? Like, I use GPT things all the time, but I have no idea what it stands for. I know the T is transformer. What is PLOS?
Public Library of Science.
That was far more straightforward than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Nonprofit open access publisher. Yeah.
Well, they gave a survey to a lot of academics who publish in English, and they found out about their proficiency in English, whether they were new learners or experienced English speakers, or whether English was their L1 or not. Mm-hmm. And they asked them about the time it took them to do certain kinds of things. Did they get English speakers to proofread their papers? Did they present at conferences? What kinds of publications did they do?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to run down some of their main points here. First, non-native English speakers need more time to read papers. They need more time to write papers. This is obvious. They need more effort to proofread their papers. They're more likely to have their papers rejected by journals because of English writing compared to native English speakers. They have to spend more effort because they try to publish their work in multiple languages, which adds a little bit of extra cost, which I hadn't thought of. And they also sometimes find that it's a barrier to attending conferences. And then if they do present at conferences, they have to take a lot more time to prepare their presentations than L1 English speakers do.
Yeah.
So there were just a number of things that I, English speaker that I am, hadn't really thought of. And there is a cost, and they're documenting that cost in this paper, which is, I think, quite good. That's
really cool. And if we're real here, it's not like English is going to stop being the scientific lingua franca anytime soon. It used to be when science was more like a hobby for rich people. It used to be that you had a classics education and you could also speak French, Latin, and classic Greek. That's no longer the case. It's mainly English, which in a way actually democratizes science, ironically, because now you don't have to know French and English and Latin and Greek. But for people who listen, who are scientists and who are native English speakers and who are feeling spoiled, which you sort of are, I'd like to encourage you to consider that English is the lingua franca in science, but it's not the same English that you use. It's not the same. It could be something different. Like, it is a particular variety of English that's a lingua franca, and we have some power over that. And I would like people to, if they could, avoid super infrequent words that we non-native speakers have to look up all the time. Because...
Yeah, take that into account, yeah.
Because when people use idioms or very rare words in their writing, I have to stop. And English speakers don't, and it is a little bit annoying. And this is a function I wish that like Grammarly or any of those had, which is just like, just so you know, you use a super infrequent word, and there is a more common word for this that's essentially a synonym. Why don't you use that instead?
That would be good.
That would be really good.
And of course, every field has its jargon, but we could be doing better than we are.
Well, jargon, if you're in that field, you should pick up on. But when people use like flowery language, I know people who vehemently disagree with me and who are like, no, scientific writing should be flowery and poetry and beautiful. And I'm just like, no, it shouldn't. It should say the facts. And I don't. You're not Hemingway.
It's a weird register, isn't it? I mean, it's a written-only register. And it's also like, it's comprised of really infrequent English.
It's funny as well how much people hinge, like how much people equate your intelligence with your proficiency in this register. I have friends who are proofreading papers I'm writing at the moment, and sometimes they're like, Hedwig, you're so informal. And I'm like, am I? I'm factual. Like, why do I have to contort myself to fit into... Ugh. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's a good suggestion. So use as simple language as appropriate. I think that's a good suggestion. Another suggestion could be, if you are a proficient English speaker, then offer to help researchers who are English learners.
Yeah. That's also true. I happen to be married too. I mean, we're talking here as if I am not very good at English. I don't mean to brag.
You are proficient.
But I am fairly good at it.
Pretty good.
I'm pretty good. I actually have some trouble reading Swedish now.
Oh, okay. I've been trying to avoid the term native speaker because it, assumes that everybody with an L1 in English, everybody whose L1 is English is equally good, and I don't think that's true. But also, it holds learners to this impossible standard because you'll never be native if you're not, but you could still be super proficient. So I tend to talk about, being experienced in English or proficient in English. And
Right, and being
instead.
proficient in the variety that is expected. Because just like you say, there are people who have English as a first language who don't know the variety and register you need to use for scientific English, which is not the same as spoken English, right? But yeah, no, I have a lot of friends and colleagues from places like, I don't know, French or Spanish speaking cultures, which are pretty big languages where they've been able to do a lot of their education in their languages, or China, and who, it's not always easy writing English. It's a lot of those hurdles that you mentioned are very, very real.
Okay, well, those are some suggestions that we could do. Oh, forgot to mention. One of the problems with the study is that it might actually be worse than the study says, because when they were recruiting people for the survey, they were looking at people who are actively publishing in English, and that excludes people who gave up.
Yeah.
So the problem
definitely.
could be worse, worse than that.
Survivorship bias, yeah.
If we want to help the situation, there are things we can do. We're taking other suggestions as well. Hit us up, hello@becauselanguage.com. It's time for our favorite game, Related or Not.
Yep. Okay.
You ready?
Yes. I've been thinking a lot about this game lately.
I have too.
Because I've thought of candidates, but then
Have you?
I thought about what you said, which is we can't just have word pairs that are surprisingly connected, because then me and Ben are just always going to guess, yes, they're related, because why would else be in the game? There has to be some red herrings. There has to be things that look like they're related, but they're not.
Yep. I do love the surprising ones that people present to us. They're great.
I do too.
But I like the ones that arise naturally from conversations throughout my day. And they do pop up once you start thinking about them.
Is that one now?
Yeah, my 6-year-old daughter says,
yeah,
I would think I was sewing a button on something, and she says, why is it called a button when it's not the butt of anything? She latched on to the word butt inside the word button. She's like, what's the relationship?
That's smart.
My kids hand me a lot of these, by the way. So I thought,
That's
you know what?
smart.
All right, I'm just going to take this one as it comes. This is probably nothing.
You got a smart cookie.
Oh, I know. And they're really thinking about language. So I thought, well, this is probably not a thing, but I'm just going to do it. I'm going to pop it in the show. Let's try it. So is there a chance that button and butt are related? And I mean butt as in the end of something, the butt end of something, like your bottom, your posterior, or the butt of a rifle or the butt of a cigarette or something like that. Not the verb to butt somebody like a goat tries to butt you. All right. So what do you think? I have made my guess.
Wait, when a goat tries to butt you, like headbutt you, you're saying that that's unrelated to the butt of a bread?
Oh, no, I'm not making any claims about related or not for that one. I'm just saying let's focus on the end of bread or the end of a rifle or something like that.
Okay,
let's focus on that sense of butt.
I know. How are buttons made?
How are buttons made?
Is it that you have a cylinder that you chop, like the candy?
Right.
Because if so, then each button when it's getting made is the butt of that cylinder.
It would be. And I don't know how they used to be made when the word was getting coined. So you found a little tie in there that it might be the end of something.
Well, I mean, if that's how buttons are made, they're probably made from a sheet that you stamp out the holes, and that's not the same thing. So
no, it's not. Could be extruded if it's plastic.
The way we started this conversation is leading me to believe that this is one of the magical, not related ones.
Okay.
So I'm going to guess for that.
Just a total coincidence that it's okay. My guess was, I thought, before knowing anything about it, I thought this was related.
Okay.
Because a butt is the end of something, and a button, like your butt protrudes, or the butt of a rifle, it protrudes, and a button protrudes as well.
Through the hole.
Through the hole. So I said related.
It's also at the end of the textile part.
Yeah. It's an extremity.
Yeah.
Am I changing your mind?
No. No, you're not.
Okay. Then I went and looked it up, and here's the answer. They are related. Yep. A butt is the end of something, and a button is too. So here's the path. They both come from a Proto-Indo-European root bhau, B-H-A-U, to strike, which is why a goat can butt someone with its head. Okay. Now the word from there went to Proto-Germanic butan, where it probably meant something like to thrust or to strike or to push. So there we go. We got to Proto-Germanic. Now from there, butt moved to Dutch bot, or Low German bot, meaning blunt or dull, and it meant the thick end of something. And by 1450, it meant the butt end of an animal that you might eat, because that's pretty thick. Spell that however you want.
Wait.
Yep.
You have a knife, you have a sharp edge, and you have a blunt edge.
Yep.
You're saying that the Dutchman called the blunt edge bot something.
The butt of the knife is the handle part, not
okay. Not the blunt edge of the blade.
Right. That's a different thing. Not under consideration here. Okay.
Okay.
Now, so that's where butt came from, and human butts came from that as well. Now, while this was going on, Proto-Germanic butan, which meant push or thrust, was moving over to Old French, where people used it to describe a kind of bud, like a flower bud, that you would push or thrust through a hole in your clothing, and they described it as a botton, which then became button.
Oh my God.
So these two are related. They are a protrusion that you push or thrust through a thing, as it were.
I didn't know this episode was going to get so sort of lewd.
So rumpy-pumpy, I know. Okay, well, let's take it to bed then, because we had this is our second one. Mean? Well, on our Discord, we had a discussion about the word doona.
Uh-huh.
Which is, you know what that is.
In Australian English, it's the fluffy thing that you put into some sheets and you sleep under.
That's right. You might call it a duvet or even a comforter. Mm-hmm. And the view was floated that doona was probably from down, because of course doonas are filled with fluffy blankets that are filled with sometimes down.
Yes, but the way the Australians spell it is D-U-N-E-R, I believe. Which sounds like it's like, right?
Oh, I've never seen that. No, I've only seen D-O-O-N-A.
Okay, I'm when it comes to spelling, I think our listeners have learned. Don't trust me.
That's all right. That's fine.
Bad at spelling.
Anyway, one of those Scottish things.
Exactly.
It's a doona.
Yeah.
Because it's full of doon.
Like doonadin.
Yeah. But then I thought, what about down the feathers and down the opposite of up? Are they related or are they not? What do you think?
Oh my God. You're going so galaxy brain. I feel like we need to rein you in. But your daughter is the same, so I don't. Maybe it's impossible.
I know it's like I'm not going anywhere. It's just going to happen.
So fowl birds have down.
They do.
Only birds have down. Alpacas don't have down.
No, they don't.
Okay, good. So it has to be feathers.
Have you ever felt an alpaca? Alpacas are friggin' soft, man. I tried to stroke an alpaca at one of those farms, and I could feel, it was weird. It was a weird experience stroking an alpaca because I could feel the warmth of the animal, but I couldn't feel the fur. It was so fine that my coarse fingers couldn't feel it. All I could feel was the warmth. Amazing.
That is weird.
So
okay.
Weird.
So,
anyway.
But down is only for birds. It's only for feather stuff.
As far as I know.
Okay. And I mean, surprise, surprise. If birds are flying or something, down is going to fall down.
That's right.
Right?
It's gonna come down. It's not gonna go up.
I'm sticking with my red herring guns. I think it's not related.
Okay, I thought that it was related. Now, I haven't investigated ducks and geese thoroughly, but I do know that if you want to get at those little teeny feathers, they're not up at the top.
No.
You have to go down.
Yeah.
You know? So.
No, you have to go in.
Yeah, well, inward, yes. It's not really down, is it? Anyway, I thought there was enough of a relationship that maybe they were related. Okay, so you're saying not related. I'm saying related.
Yeah.
The answer, they are not related at all.
Yes, finally pays off.
Yes. So let's talk about down, the direction, because there's a surprising history here. Comes from Old English, off dune, which means off of the dune, where the dune is a hill. So when you're coming down off the hill,
What?
you're coming down. Yeah, down and dune are related. I did not see that coming.
What?
Yep.
It's in time for the Dune movies as well.
That's right. You're up on the dune, then you come dune. Anyway, so that's Old English, off dune. But down, the feathers come from Old Norse dun, and we can't go back any farther. Do you know any Scandi reflexes for dun?
Yeah, Dune.
Feathers?
That's just what down is called in Scandi. Dune.
That's just what it is. Yep.
And dunes on the desert are dyner. Dyn. So it's dune.
And what's the direction down?
Ner.
Really? Oh, see? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's pretty convincing then that it's not related. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eh.
Up is upp. Nedan. Ovanför, nedanför. Yeah, no, it's all... This D thing is not a thing.
Yep. Well, that was fun. Congratulations. We both got 1 for this one.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Ben got 0.
I have one that I want to send to you and that you can research.
Okay.
And I can guess.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Do you want to register it now? Let's register it
Yes,
now.
I want to register it. Okay. Mug, as in a mug. Here's my beautiful Bolton Wanderers Football Club mug that I'm showing to the camera.
Yes, thing you drink from. Yep.
And mug, as in face, and therefore also mugshot.
We've seen some famous mugshots this week, haven't we?
We have indeed.
I know this one. Do you want to guess?
You know this one. How do you know this one? How?
Because I field a lot of questions from a lot of people.
My God.
Related or not.
Oh shit. Now I've put myself in the
hot seat. Woo.
Maybe I'll go against my trend today and say they are related. That there's something about face, like the I don't know. I'm gonna guess they're related. I don't know why. I just have a gut feeling.
Okay, the answer is they are related. Yep.
Wow.
So
Really?
here's what's going on. It's because in the 1700s there were cups that you would drink from, and they were shaped like people's faces. You'd say, man, that's one ugly mug you got there. It was just a common thing. It was just this weird thing where there would be this drinking vessel and it was like in the shape of this grotesque, cartoony face.
On like the side? Like the side of the mug?
The way I envision it is you hold the handle and then the face is pointing away from the handle. That's how I imagine it. And it was just this wacky thing that they had in the 1700s. There were just a lot of cups shaped like people's faces. It could also be metonymy, where the meaning of a thing transfers to a nearby thing. So you have a mug that you're drinking from and it's near your face. So the meaning jumps from the mug to your face. I'm looking at his mug and then that's his face. So
Right. But mugs are not always in our faces.
not always, no, but often enough. Is there a Scandi reflex for mug?
Mug. Also, we just borrowed the for the drinking vessel, but not for the face.
Yeah, okay. Edam Online says, based on the old drinking mugs shaped like grotesque faces, popular in England from 17th century, the 1600s.
What about to mug someone?
That one comes from thieves' slang because a mug was a mark, or the dupe, the one who gets fooled or the one who gets robbed.
Huh.
And that's because somebody hits you in the face, they hit you in your mug, and then you get mugged. So they're all related in that way.
This is fascinating. Jenny, you're a treasure throw, however you it's my last bastion of not being a perfect English speaker is the fucking treasure throve. God.
Trove?
You are
It's not a throve, it's a trove. So you're okay. You're saying it right.
You are great.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm glad that came up because that's strangely, I mean, if we didn't want to make that a word of the week, and I didn't, we were able to stick it here. Yay!
Yeah, that was my, related or not, into word of the week.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for playing at home. Remember, if you want to give us your related or not questions, please do. Remember, the best ones are the ones that eventuate spontaneously, not from lists. So send them to us. hello@becauselanguage.com. We are talking to a very special guest on Because Language. She's a lecturer in English at Oxford University, and she's the author of the new book, Mother Tongue, The Surprising History of Women's Words. It's Dr. Jenni Nuttall. Hey, Jenni, thanks for coming to chat with us.
Hi, thanks for inviting me on.
Let's start with you. What's your connection to words, and how did that lead you into this project?
So I teach at Oxford. I teach Old English literature and medieval English literature, and I also teach a first year kind of very, very introductory. It's called Approaches to Language, a kind of ideas about language. And I was thinking more and more about, as well as all the kind of literary work I do, and I've worked on Chaucer and other authors, just more and more fascination with how language has changed over time and how words appear and disappear. And I was thinking that there was a kind of space for this kind of book. There hadn't been a really great book about women and language for a while, and particularly one that kind of really went all the way back to the first phases of English. So I thought I might be as someone who kind of teaches the first bits of English. I thought, well, that might be a really good focus for me to write something for a wider audience on women and language.
And when you go back in those kind of sources, I imagine that a lot of them are written by male authors about women, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So I'm thinking particularly about it's that sort of the various meanings of women's words, but women's words in the sense of sets of vocabulary that are used to describe women's lives, their experiences, their bodies. And yes, exactly right. You know, just occasionally you can pick up straight from the horse's mouth women's words, but more often, as you say, most of the sources reflecting what men say about women.
That was one of the ideas that I got from the book, because one of the themes is, especially with body parts and bodily functions, these things were taboo. And so the only people that we were hearing from about these things were men. So it was clearly discourse about women, but very much on men's terms. That's the feeling I got.
Yeah. I think, and particularly, I mean, it's funny sort of looking at it from the beginning forwards. I think that's particularly the case as you go through to say 18th century ideas of decorum, and then that sort of classic stereotype we have of the Victorians and prudishness, and that's sort of half right. These topics become unsayable in certain public contexts, and kind of, you know, the lots of rude words and words about body parts, for example, taken out of dictionaries in case kind of women and children might see them. But men in those centuries are kind of carrying on the sort of talk they've always done, and that's why I think we get a lot of, or some of the words for kind of body parts, and particularly to do with women's sexuality and things like that, coming out of these beginnings of kind of gynecology and psychology and sexology and things like that. And because there hasn't been this kind of continuing of even women just talking in the kind of shared set of words that have been used up to that point, we sort of get this strange split into kind of quite formal language in a lot of cases. And then later on you get slang, but we've sort of lost the bit that, I mean, there always has been taboo, but I have a slight sense that as you go back in the story of English, there were slightly more words that were sort of just in the middle.
Right. But maybe didn't get written down in the kind of literature that survived to today.
Yeah.
Or got written down at all. Maybe people just spoke about them in their kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe you just pick them up occasionally as kind of synonyms in early dictionaries or as glosses to kind of Latin. You know, they're kind of there round the edges. And you're right, probably more spoken, probably less learned. But, you know, there were phases of earlier words that then kind of get lost in the churn. And one of the things I was finding over and over again as I was researching for this book, I would think, oh, actually, you know, from the perspective of a medievalist, that's quite a new word that we have in modern English. And was it the case that there was complete silence before that on that topic? Well, often the answer was no. There were antecedents that have kind of come and gone. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of go back and look at those and see what they could tell us.
Does that also mean that those words that were taboo showed, because I had this lecturer in linguistics in Sweden when I was at uni who was interested in words that were taboo because they can have a fun variation, because no one in school is going to, like, for example, for us, it was, in Sweden, we have a particular verb to push snow into someone's face. Very practical word if you live in Sweden and you're in playgrounds. And that word has a lot of like variation throughout the country, because no teacher is going to tell you that you used the wrong word. They're just going to tell you to not do it. Right? So you don't get the standardization of mass media and mass education, because they're never going to take this word in their mouth. And I imagine the same is true for like taboo words to do with, for example, women's bodies, that there could be a lot of like variation and fun things going on, because no one's going to tell you, don't say blah.
They're not going to say blah instead. They're just going to say, don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there must have been a kind of theory and practice issue that, a lot of the words, even the earlier words we have, are coming out of medical writing, scientific writing, or, what counts as expertise in its time, anatomical treatises. And there's a certain sense of sort of these labels, particularly for body parts, not necessarily correspond, or these are kind of often kind of on paper terms. And you're right, there are some nicknames and some kind of there's often, when I was really trying to research sort of parts of female sexual anatomy, you find there's a sort of confusion and words referring to more than one part and kind of changing around as if they're kind of quite hard to tie up, but then you also get quite often preserved in some of these sources just some of these kind of vernacular, either metaphors or kind of nicknames or glosses that might give you a sense of kind of what's being said, and they're slightly different from what we have now, which is sort of the formal and the Latinate on the one hand, and then kind of slang and euphemism on the other. So it was interesting to find, where there was taboo and where there wasn't. Chaucer's wife of Bath is often cited as a woman who's, or a depiction of a woman very confidently talking about sex and sexual reproduction and parts of her anatomy. But even Chaucer has her slightly sidestep some of the rude words, or give you a kind of fancier version of what his audience must have known as other words, rude words, for that sort of courtly audience that he's writing for. So even before taboo really, really kind of strengthens and they become unsayable, it's a language that's got quite a lot going on in it, depending on kind of who's speaking and why.
I feel like we're tiptoeing around it here. Can you give us an example of a word or an area that's gotten like mashed up, recombined? What examples are we talking about here? We need to get rude.
Oh, well, there's a sort of blurriness to start with. So you get words like womb, belly, and sheath, which sort of can or lap can refer to the general area as well as particular things. Vocabulary to do with things like the clitoris and the labia, that's quite unstable, and you're not quite sure whether the name and the part are always kind of staying the same. Vulva shifts around, perhaps from originally meaning womb, and then meaning a sort of part, a collection of parts, and then as you get more and more terms and things sort of differentiate as vagina comes in, thanks to Renaissance anatomy. So that even that small set of words to do with women's private parts are kind of responding to each other as new words come in, and as more or less knowledge is being used about them.
I know the vagina vulva thing. I don't know if you remember, Danny. Do you remember when I had a fight with that guy on Twitter like 2 years ago? No? You're
going to have to remind me, I think.
It was just someone had written a piece about and in the title there was something vagina and talking about something, and a man had commented under and been like, the part you're talking about is actually called vulva. And it's like, I mean, maybe if this person was writing a gynecological thesis, this would be a good point, but like, this is not
Thanks,
the
genital
point.
police.
Yeah, and it was so weird. And it was like, look, because nowadays people have this very strong idea that vulva is only the outside parts and vagina is only the inside parts up to the cervix. And I think historically, like Jenny was saying, that might have floated around anyway. And also, it just seems like not the right time to police someone. I don't know. It was funny. But those are quite like Latinate, like formal words to me.
Yeah, and also I keep thinking of vagina, the word meaning, as I learned in the book, meaning sheath. It's like not a thing. It only exists in response to a sword, but the sword is the thing. The sheath is, it's just, there's just this whole, like I see a lot of people wanting to just get rid of it.
Yeah, in Sweden, the word is literally sheath, like the same word that we use for sheath.
Well, there you go.
Like not, like, because in vagina, at least you can be like, people don't know that's sheath, right? Unless, look into it.
You shouldn't, I'm not mounting a real defense of it, but it turns up just as a sort of descriptive analogy. This is the work of Renaissance anatomists who are now looking, not like the kind of medieval guys trying to match the kind of name and the thing in theory, but kind of looking at the fabric of the human body and starting to kind of pin down some of these older terms that have floated around. So clitoris there for a long time, but starts to be right there. I can see it, and vagina come in just as an attempt to kind of explain kind of co-evolution and and of course it does. There's no accident that particular metaphor is chosen, but it's interesting that then jumps to become the word for the thing, and clearly in more than one language.
And then cunt during this time has become completely unsayable, whereas this was not always so.
Well, I'm glad you said it. I've had to be very careful because I've had other people recording radio programs saying, whatever you do, you must not say that word. I mean, I think it always has a sort of, where does it turn up in the early Middle Ages in kind of jokey place names, in sometimes in kind of medical textbooks as a kind of gloss, but it does carry on all the way through to Renaissance dictionaries. It turns up there as a synonym. So for quite a long while it's not anywhere near where it is today, which for some people and some kind of circumstances completely unsayable. So that shows you that even that process of taboo is kind of dynamic and unstable. But Chaucer's a coward. Chaucer does one of these kind of almost like a minced oath. He just kind of swerves the word a couple of times in the Wife of Bastel, and I find that interesting. Whereas there are kind of medical textbooks and kind of university town place names that are kind of keeping that word at that point in time.
And I guess one great way of avoiding taboo words is to use like metaphor. I learned recently that like in ancient Greece, it was well known that like if you talked about a fig, that's a lady parts. So you can always apparently. Sorry, this is derailing. Never mind. Scratch that.
That's all right.
Fig lady parts. I like that.
Yes, although I think there's a colleague at Oxford who wrote a blog who said, no, it's male parts. It's one of the,
really?
there is a great dictionary of kind of, which I used in play, for obscene Latin, and the I think it's called the Dictionary of the Latin Sexual Vocabulary, and it kind of, you can kind of find your way into all of these terms. I was interested in finding things that weren't quite slang, that were just at that point where English is being used to kind of gloss and translate and offer synonyms and kind of move knowledge out to a broader audience. I was really interested to see what kind of there may not have been kind of the words used in the everyday, but words that people thought readers would understand. So wings or lips or ports or passages or wickets. These just kind of functional
oh my God.
descriptions.
I'm married to a British man, and I think I finally understand cricket now. But one thing that frustrates me with cricket is that wicket means at least 2, if not 3 things.
Yeah, I think I understand cricket less now.
Yeah. Wicket.
Wicket. So like a little gate. No, I'm not sure about cricketing vocabulary, but it might be the thing with the bails on that looks like a little gate, and then you get the kind of the extensions that it also becomes the name for getting the person out, the name that thing run on. Yeah, English has it kind of duplicates, but it's there as a sort of euphemism, description,
a little gate.
Gate.
Now I kind of like it.
Co-occurs with sticky. Sticky with
There we are. You've lowered the tone.
Never thought about that. I want to talk about a different word. I want to talk about the word woman. Because that goes way, way back. And lately, the authoritarian right is trying to turn the word woman and the definition of woman into a kind of gotcha. Was this predictable? Did you expect that? What's been your reaction to seeing this?
Makes me want to write something about the fact that words can have kind of distinct or different but related senses at the same time. Like, polysemy, you might call it. And that though, the attempts to turn to the dictionary or to offer a kind of short definition that doesn't take account of usage and the possibility of related but distinct uses sitting alongside each other is going to, that people think it works as a gotcha. And I suppose it does work as a gotcha if you're trying to give a kind of easy answer. But what I want to do is just say, okay, why is this kind of discussion going on? And I think linguistics can help by saying, look, words don't work, with a kind of necessarily a kind of core, stable, central denotation and then kind of things around the edges. Actually, what you can have is kind of related but distinct meanings that users are all using together at the same time, and we negotiate them.
I like that a lot, because I like to think about it as if I have an idea concept in my head and I'm articulating words, I am trying to get that concept into your head. And I'm not going to get exactly the same concept into your head. I'm not going to have 100% perfect information transfer, because you have different experiences and you've learned different things and you have a slightly different interpretation of the word, but it's going to be like close enough, right? It's got to be like similar enough that when I point at the thing and said, get me that thing, you get me that thing. Like, that is the point, not like that we have, it just needs to be enough sort of overlapping, enough similar that we can get through life and society and communicate and get things done. But it doesn't need to be that kind of stable. And because there is that similar overlapping enough, you get dynamic, you get changes, you get variation.
Yes.
And words change.
Yes. And though I'm really interested in etymology, I don't think that if you find out the etymology, you kind of solve or create a definition. And what I show in the book is that lots of terms kind of move around and change and evolve, and that's where you come to kind of senses and usage.
I feel though, like, Daniel, you might need to do an explanation of what your question is about.
I think we're talking about trans women, and some people are saying, what's a woman? And, the authoritarian right has an easy answer, and it just involves, they talk about chromosomes or genitals, whatever. And then if you say, this is kind of a complicated area, then they say, aha, you're so stupid, you can't even define what a woman is, blah, blah, blah.
Oh.
So I think that's what's going on.
Oh, God, that is so stupid. It hasn't even registered on my radar.
Oh, so here we've been talking around it. Okay, well, I think this is why we speak very specifically, isn't it? Yeah. So that's where I was going with that. I think that's what the debate is. I mean, everyone is just so weird about it.
It's not a debate. That's someone saying
going.
something stupid and everyone else being like, let's just not talk to them.
You're right. Good point. Jenni, tell us about a word that you have found interesting you've written an entire book about them, but what do you want to pull out and show us about how words have wound around and remixed and gone different places? Tell us a great story.
Okay. Well, I was interested to think about Ms. and Mrs. particularly. I mean, the sort of, once you get to be a doctor something, and if you're a married doctor something, you're quite pleased sometimes if people are kind of fishing to say, am I going to call you Miss or Ms or Mrs, and you say doctor actually. And I hadn't really I'd sort of just assumed that I didn't want to be Mrs whatever. Sorry.
No, I'm the same. I am married and I am a doctor, and I like getting to use doctor. Yeah. It's fun.
But I discovered, reading some really great scholarship, that actually that Mrs distinction for adult women, kind of unmarried, married, only really comes about in the middle of the 18th century, so quite recent. And then before that, you have Mrs as the kind, it's the speeded up version of mistress, and it starts off as a kind of honorific to kind of address any, lots of different types of women, married and unmarried, who are exercising authority or kind of in charge of people or have a certain sort of status. And then obviously Miss is the kind of junior version of that for under 18s, the sort of people who are going to grow up and become probably mistresses. So that made me kind of think again and think, okay, we didn't used to slice and dice things that way. Mistress was a word that wasn't necessarily quite so tightly connected to marital status as we think of it now, but to do with other sorts of social status. And it's only when the sort of marriageable but not yet married daughters of wealthier families want to be able to have a title that's separate from the kind of the other misses in their households, maybe kind of senior servants and tradeswomen that they come across, that you get this kind of new fashion for an adult miss. So I found it great that, this is what I was trying to do a lot in the book, to take some of these things that we think of as kind of fixtures in our vocabulary and perhaps in our thinking about feminism, and just kind of check them out and see whether things were quite as simple.
Seems like with mistress, once it was uncoupled and became Mrs., then mistress was sort of free to do what it wanted. And then you had things like someone you're having an affair with, or perhaps a dominatrix. So mistress has really gone some interesting directions.
Yeah, so really pejorated and losing, its sense of an equivalent for master, mistress, and sometimes we say, the mistress of all she's of it, all that kind of thing. But you're right, mostly feminist linguists have pointed this out over and over again, that there are kind of asymmetries, things that start off as pairs. The one that's applied to women often goes through a very different kind of evolution, and mistress is one of those.
I read a sci-fi book where there are androids and there are humans, and all humans get the title just M. Which is like a combination of Miss, Mr., and Mrs. and Ms.
And mix.
And androids get A. And I really like it. I really like it. But I come from
androids,
a culture.
Yes.
It's just fun sci-fi. But I come from a culture where we don't use titles at all, and I don't care so much about Miss, Mrs., Ms. But I get annoyed when I have to supply one, which happens a lot abroad. Especially I live in Germany now, where I can thankfully use doctor some of the time, but I'm just like, why is this a thing? But anyway, that's just my problem living in Germany as a Swede.
Hey Hedvig, give us another one from the list. Which ones did you find interesting?
There was one that I marked. What's it called? Knick-knack, Nick. Where is it?
You might be thinking of, there's this lovely word for a kind of, a shop selling kind of trinkets and objects that I kind of chuck in passing, called a knick-knackatory.
Yeah. Nice. I just highlighted that, but I realized that was not actually a woman's word.
That comes in because supposedly it's one of the places you might buy a dildo.
Tell us about dildo. Because I've seen any number of etymologies for that, and I haven't been able to get to the bottom of it, so to speak. Is it Italian deleto for delight, something like that? Or where do we get it from? Where does this word come from?
I go follow Oxford English Dictionary where they kind of, obviously you've still got some of the kind of older etymologies and definitions in there because of its history, but you can look and see when the kind of definitions and the etymologies were kind of checked. And I think I follow OED for dildo, which is that it may just come from kind of nonsense syllables, which I like. I wrote a little article on gibberish. I used to be slightly obsessed with kind of gibberish and these things called non-lexical vocables, the kind of syllables you sing in songs, things like hey, nonny nonny, and with a dill and a dough, and that kind of thing. Yeah, kind of sort of late medieval Tudor choruses and kind of bits that are kind of sung in songs. And one of the connections that's suggested in the dictionary etymology there is that there's a sort of double entendre or a kind of nudge wink thing going on with hey, nonny nonny, because it rhymes with cunny, which takes us back to Connie and kind of slang for vagina, vulva, and that quite a lot of these sort of chorus singable bits of nonsense get kind of borrowed to become kind of slangy euphemisms for things that are becoming increasingly taboo, and that dildo comes from there because it has this slightly kind of wicked sense of something I'm not going to say. And it's first recorded, I think, in the work of a poet called Thomas Nash, the object itself, and he's in exactly the right sort of place to be kind of seeing this move of kind of nonsense syllables that are becoming sort of rude words you can use for things. And it's interesting. I mean, dildo. There's a dictionary called the dictionary, sort of dictionary of kind of vulgarity, and dildo is there in the kind of earlier editions of that dictionary, but as it's published, its definition is hidden and put into Latin and kind of greatly reduced. So I think that's one of these sort of words and that were sort of talked about somewhat more publicly, and then over decades, over centuries, are kind of pulled back, kind of out of kind of public glossing and explanation, so we just get left with this kind of funny word that sounds a bit Italian or Latin or whatever. Whereas it's it's there in earlier dictionaries and gone in later ones, and then comes back again, obviously.
I want to ask about timing for a second, because I had this idea that, people were, clamping down on rude words, and then in the 1800s or 1900s, people just sort of opened it up and started saying whatever. But I'm feeling like that's wrong. I'm feeling like there was a time when the language was open and people were talking about things, but then there was a clamp down or a bottleneck of some kind, and it has opened up. Can you give me a sense of the timing? When did we start just avoiding these things out of shame or sex negativity, or censoring them?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, and I'm painting with very broad brushstrokes here, because, to talk about the kind of whole fields of usage like that is, difficult. But if you look, for example, at what words are and then aren't in dictionaries, there is definitely a process through the 18th and 19th century that dictionaries are being advertised as not having these words. It's a kind of two-strand thing. I think that's what makes it a kind of hard idea to get right, because it's clearly right that the Victorians, say, are very interested in sex and sexology and psychology and anatomy and gynecology and all of those things happening at the kind of scientific in inverted commas a lot of the time, kind of often to kind of prop up bits of kind of sexism or racism or other things like that are kind of at the risk of being disproved. So that language is kind of flourishing, and it gives us lots of our modern words today, the sexual senses of climax, say, or orgasm, or frigidity, all those sorts of things. But at the same time, I think you can make an argument that there's a bit more restriction on what a sort of non-expert, non-authoritative speakers are allowed to say when it comes to some of these more tabooed topics. And if you go backwards, back to the sort of early 17th and the 16th century, I don't think there's quite, but partly because English is still doing a slightly different job at that point, kind of still coming out of that space where it's been the language of kind of glosses and translation and speech and the everyday sort of, I don't know whether it's to do with kind of social mores or to do with kind of hierarchies within language, but that, in some of the first dictionaries, which are often dedicated to women patrons and sometimes presented as being for kind of women to help them understand language. Now, sometimes that might be a bit of a kind of marketing ploy because you don't want to tell male readers that they need a dictionary. You need another way to kind of say
but
that.
You could buy one for your wife.
Yeah, but you can see that the glosses contain much more of this language that later on is tabooed. And I was also, if you look at, say, printings of Chaucer's Miller's Tale, which is one of the famous kind of rude fabliaux with the kind of arse kissing and the bottom out of windows, that is kind of cleaned up as you move forward in time. That Chaucer has arse, for example, and then it becomes bum, and then it becomes kind of completely kind of euphemized, and then in some of the Victorian collections of Chaucer, that tale's not printed at all. So there are processes by which kind of words which were there can fall out of use, I think. And I was interested in kind of going back and seeing what had got lost in these, quite big, complicated shifts about kind of public speech and about taboo and about sort of registers within language.
What's a word that you found had stayed quite stable?
I like that question.
Oh, I mean, that's,
maybe most stable is is the title rather than stable, because it seems like this is an area, like you were saying, there's so much going on.
There's a lot of churn.
Yeah.
So like a lot of things getting overturned. But was there anything that sort of stayed more or less the same?
I mean, you can have kind of words where the referent is kind of pretty much clear all the way through, but kind of usage is shifting.
Oh yeah.
And it's interesting that, we have sort of the parts of the body part words that are not tabooed kind of are fairly, often come straight from kind of old English or Old Norse, and with all their kind of sound changes, basically come all the way through. So sort of, yeah, that's a good point. That lots of language doesn't get lost, doesn't change. So, and I think the language I was looking at, where you do get kind of words like words for menstruation, which were once used, sort of now disappeared. You sort of think, those are the spaces where there's some sort of pressure, just as you get those pressures for kind of jargon or slang or euphemism, where you need to keep kind of renovating in that kind of concept, because so it's a kind of useful thing to look at, kind of what stays.
We like to call it, Daniel, we made a word, didn't we? The euphemism bicycle? Did we call it that?
What did we come up with?
We've talked about this before on the show, both for
the euphemism cycle,
both for like rude words, but also for like words like the word for the person who cleans a space.
Or racial terms. They're always being sort of updated.
Racial terms. Professions that people look down upon, people that people look down upon, or things that are taboo tend to have a higher rate of change. But yeah, was there anything that sort of...
Yeah, what's the same?
You said there were things that where the reference sort of stays the same and the word sort of stays the same, but the usage differs. Can you think of an example like that?
Well, I suppose, we were talking about, well, kind of senses, woman and female, those are terms that come from really quite early on in English, but, they you don't there get lexical change. You get different types of kind of semantic change and kind of expand things of meaning. I suppose, as I was writing this sort of book, you're looking for the things that have changed in interesting ways. I think that's what people might be sort of interested to read, the things that have got lost, the things where the now, like vagina, we were talking about, we don't necessarily know the origin, but it's kind of interesting to find it out, or those words where there's been enough kind of lexical or semantic change to really show you that anything we might look at and think, oh, that's very fixed and stable, that's probably a bit of an illusion to some degree.
Speaking of female, I was wondering what's going on with the adjective female, because some people don't like being described as a female doctor. They would say a woman doctor. Have you observed anything new in this process?
That's interesting. I wonder if that's sort of a bit more kind of localized and personal. I don't know. I might turn that on its head and say I would prefer female X than the woman. You know, when women start moving into certain professions and kind of joining, doing things that only men have traditionally touched, you get woman used as a kind of prefix, woman poet, woman doctor, but you know, and then female might be for possibly the kind of less marked way of just pointing that out if you need to point it out. You know, I don't know what's going on, because I think maybe different people have a different sense of kind of which of those two is preferable.
I think the reason I, as a woman, don't like the female one is because I don't like it when it's used as a noun, like that I am a female, because to me that signals that I am like a horse. Yeah. Like that's the word. I don't know, in English you don't have a good word for it, but like that's the word we would use for like that's that thing. But I like you say, like I don't have super strong feelings about it with female versus woman doctor. I think if someone said something like that, I would be like, why are they pointing that out? Do I need to know that? If it's something like, oh, would you prefer a female gynecologist instead of a male gynecologist? I can sort of understand that, maybe, that like...
Yeah, and I think you hear, you know, if I'm thinking of where people are talking about, you know, the first female referee to do a certain thing, or you know, I think the usage maybe is going back around to using kind of female for that, to kind of note that fact, you know, point out that kind of the history of sexism means that kind of women haven't done that thing, and so yeah, I think there's a lot of, again, that's a good example of where, you know, pressures around words just kind of shift the usage in interesting ways.
Okay, I want to ask this very speculative question. You point out in the book how the discourse around women has largely been invented by men, right down to some of the words that have been invented and the terms that have been invented. What if we could wave a magic wand and get rid of all the words that men have invented for about women or about the women's domain? No more fallopian tubes. No more Braxton Hicks contractions. Right? We reset all of those. What kind of things would we no longer have? And do we have any idea of what the words might be now if we wave that magic wand?
Okay.
Gosh, it's kind of almost like a kind of science fiction thought experiment, isn't it? I mean, some of those I can think of. So yeah, Braxton Hicks, you know, there's a kind of medical expert named something, and contraction for that part of giving birth is I don't know, not to me the most helpful terms I put, but because it makes you think of something kind of closing up, and the truth, of course, is that the job contractions are doing, it's the muscle is contracting, but it's the cervix that is opening up wider and wider. So even just at that sort of metaphorical level, your contract goes one way, and actually what you want your body to do ideally at that point is to kind of go the other way. And it's interesting to me that before they were called that, they were called things that were a little more everyday, perhaps pangs or throes, a bit like the throes of passion. So I'm not sure I can answer the bigger question, but I think, you know, we could imagine a world in which some of those somewhat more either metaphorical or descriptive or kind of informal terms had kind of made it through, and there weren't these situations where, yes, I mean, being in childbirth is one of them, where you kind of have to learn a whole new language to kind of process what's going on. I don't know. I mean, so much of what I found that it's almost, you kind of can't think of it because so much of our vocabulary bears some trace of this process of a kind of patriarchal society kind of subordinating women in various ways. It's almost that you can't kind of imagine your way back through. There is a sci-fi novel called Native Tongue by Suzette Elgin, which makes that thought experiment, kind of women living in a very repressive society and kind of invent their own secret language as part of a kind of resistance movement. And she has a kind of glossary, and she was the kind of linguist who came up with a kind of new language, but it didn't catch on. And
Wow.
a lot of the time in the book, I was thinking, people have asked me that question, and you sort of think, well, yeah, I wouldn't start from here, but I'm not so naive to think you could kind of somehow kind of renovate everything from, we're stuck with the vocabulary we have in some senses, and there are these, around birth, so not to call things natural birth, instead to call it a physiological birth. There's some great work around just kind of unpacking the vocabulary that we inherited and thinking about kind of how we can change it. But I'm not sure that kind of wholesale thing is, I'm not sure I can even get my head around that as a kind of speculation.
There are some examples in other languages where there has organically within languages arisen different registers used by men and women. So I know like Michael Dunn talks about that in Chukchi, and there are other languages where there are certain words that only women use, and there are certain words that only men use. And in some of them, it happens that it ends up being certain sounds that happen to only occur in one of the registers. So you could say that sound is only used by one of the genders, but those have come about because of certain communal activities. And naturally, I think a lot of these kind of speculations about English in particular, like language, you can't artificially, you can in like medicine, maybe you can have a discussion about specific things when you have like specific concrete differences, like natural and physiological birth, where you're like, these evoke different things. It's good to talk about them in a more clinical, precise way. But I don't know, Daniel's larger question about like, I took the question not to be a call to action, Daniel, but more like a sci-fi thought experiment. Was that right?
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking. But, the feeling that I get through the book is that I am hearing a little bit of a call to action, because it feels like you're describing something about the language of feminism that as it developed, it helped us to see male supremacy as illegitimate and as something that could be challenged. Is that something that you were trying to do with the book?
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting it. So that the vocabulary in all sorts of ways bears the traces of the sort of the ideology, the conceptualization that are being used to kind of prop up some of these things. But I also wanted to show that, if you let yourself, as I do in the book, think a bit more kind of playfully, creatively, kind of what if, could we use that word? Is it better than that kind of thing? That even in very imperfect language, very kind of marked by its sexist origins, there might be ways you think, well, we could kind of upcycle that word or think of it differently. As we were talking about with childbirth, that it's always good to kind of stop and think about what's coming, what assumptions are kind of coming with certain sets of vocabulary. I think one of the things I noticed was that you're always trying to kind of chase a moving target, that when one sort of sexist logic is exhausted, another one kind of springs up, and it's kind of, but right the way back into history, even in a society dominated by men, you can find moments of kind of challenge, people challenging the word or challenging a kind of prevailing idea. And I suppose I wanted to kind of draw that out in the book, that even some of those sort of big sexist ideas that we can kind of dredge up from the past about women's nature or bodies or sexuality, you can find people at the time just putting their hand up and going, no, this is ridiculous. Why are you saying that? So that was fun to kind of unpack some of the, because progress is not always kind of linear, I think. And you can sort of see, even within one moment in time, kind of regressive ideas and progressive ideas kind of being debated. And that's interesting.
And women have always existed, and the Dark Ages are not total, hellhole for... Like, I think there are some ideas about the Middle Ages or European medieval history that are unnecessarily ignoring some things that maybe were a little bit progressive, or that there were voices. So I think that's really nice that you focus on some of those. That's really cool.
You mentioned the term gender dome, and I liked that, trying to break out of your gender dome.
I was sort of, I was trying to write the last chapter, which is sort of about, what might the kind of early vocabulary of feminism be. And I wanted to get across that even to kind of, because the metaphors we live by, the way in which kind of language structures thinking, it can be very hard to kind of, even to get started and kind of think your way out of your kind of social moments. I was even interested in kind of words like custom, just the points at which writers start to say, we treat women this way, but it's a custom, it's not natural. It sounds like a very kind of tiny shift, but kind of makes a big difference. So rather than just starting that chapter with the kind of beginnings of modern feminist writing that we know, I thought, well, I want to go back and just try and show you these tiny places in which the kind of supposed inevitability of this starts to kind of peel away, and people are kind of feeling under the surface and saying, okay, is that how things are? Maybe not. And you can pick up one or two words that are important in those kind of early ways. And I think that just on a personal level, I think the book is me, I'm sort of coming up to 50 now. I've been a wife and a mum for a certain amount of time. I've been a working woman, grown up girl, young woman, and I'm sort of thinking about what I experienced in that kind of gender dome of kind of how I thought about things. And for me, vocabulary is a way to kind of, other people would use all sorts of other things, but for me it's words. Just kind of if I think about words really hard, does it help me kind of see through some of that stuff? And I think it does.
And language is only one way that we can break down the gender dome, but I think it's an important way because it reveals a lot about how we think, and I think questioning the terms that we use can be useful.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's I always think of it as kind of it's language, certain words, certain language is trying to be kind of wall to wall carpet. It's trying to not let you see around the edges. And I just want to say, no, actually it's a rug, and we can lift it up and move it, and someone put it there. And, it's not covering everything.
And it has moved.
Yeah.
I think it's really helpful. Like things in our social world exist and are real concepts in the world, but they used to be a bit different. Like, isn't there famously that like blue used to be a little girl color, and you get these flips, right? Like there's nothing natural about any of this. It doesn't mean it's unreal, but it means that it can change and it will change. And if you don't fit perfectly in that category, that's not that unexpected.
It's not you.
Yeah. And that language is often doing both jobs at once, sort of trying to make it wall to wall, but also sort of letting slip things if you look at the history. So even the history of a word like girl is not straightforward. Right. It comes in as a word to mean both male and female children, and then it only sort of begins to specify female children, young women, a little bit later, and for an interesting period, it's used as a rather kind of new and marked term. You might call a female child, a young woman, a girl when she's not being a maiden or a daughter, when she's kind of doing something that's a bit boundary pushing. where it needs to be marked. And then once girl settles down, you get this wonderful rush of words like tomboy, and there are a lot of other words like Rigsby's and romps and ramps to carry on talking about girls and young women who are not living up to the supposed sort of good behaviour of their time, and you know, those words are there to kind of tell off people, to kind of say, don't be like that, but just their existence betrays something, I think.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
The book is Mother Tongue, The Surprising History of Women's Words. It's available from Virago Press. Virago, how did you work that one?
In the sense of, how did that come about?
Yeah, you've got a bit on Virago in the book.
Yeah, no, it's really nice, isn't it? That to have a press where the name was chosen with a word with this rich history, these warlike women, or sometimes it's used as a word for a kind of woman doing a man's job. There's another bit of kind of language portraying something that women do these things. No, but it was rather, I was so pleased that my wonderful editor at Virago was interested in it as a project, and then, you know, I think my agent was like, you know, you're kind of sold on this, aren't you? Because they have such an amazing history of publishing feminist writing. They're celebrating 50 years, but it's also coming out with Viking in the US. So I have Virago and Viking, which is sort of suitable in various ways.
So it's been out from Virago Press in the UK starting May 2023, but it's out on Viking Press everywhere else yesterday, I believe.
Yesterday.
Haha. Very cool. We're talking to Dr. Jenni Nuttall. Jenni, how can people find you?
They can find me. I have a website and I'm on Twitter, although Twitter seems very empty these days. My handle is completely unpronounceable, and hopefully stylisticienne, kind of the female person who teaches stylistics, which is what I sometimes do. But if you put Jenni Nuttall in, I'm sure you'll find me.
Jenni, thanks so much for having a chat with us today on Because Language. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Let's go on now to Words of the Week. The first one that I have is one that I just feel like deserves its own mention, and it's pipeline. But not the kind of pipeline that carries liquids, but the kind of pipeline that funnels you from one ideological point to another. So the first way that I noticed this, and we start seeing this expression in the early 2000s, is the school to prison pipeline, or the cradle to prison pipeline. Referring to the way that people, especially people of color, are sort of funneled from the school environment to prison because of overly harsh, zero-tolerance disciplinary policies, or bringing police into schools, that sort of thing. In 2022, I noticed an article in The Atlantic by Kathleen Ballou called "The Crunchy to Alt-Right Pipeline."
Yeah.
We've talked about crunchy, so it's nice that... What's crunchy again?
Well, crunchy, in predominantly, I think, American discourse, means someone who is like maybe a little bit similar to what you might think of as a hippie in the 60s and 70s, but a bit more of an adult version of that. Like
kind of granola.
Makes their own granola.
Yeah.
It's a person who is conscious about what they eat and eat a lot of like organic and raw and natural stuff. It's a person who is shying away from certain aspects of the commercialized nature of the capitalist hellscape we live in. And
modern society as well. Like they feel like the answers are in the past and that we need to get back to nature, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the answer is like certain versions of the past. They're not like the Liver King. They're not primal like that. But if you've seen the movie about a boy,
yep,
the boy's
crunchy.
Mother is very crunchy.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't buy your kids candy, you give them raisins instead. Some of that is like things that I grew up with that I think are very normal and good. Like I got raisins a lot.
Yeah, totally.
And similar with like Almond Mom and things, like people refer to it as like an extreme stereotype. This crunchy to alt-right pipeline, I want to flag as well is it's not all crunchy people, and it also is connected to things like people who have an interest in certain esoterical beliefs about like reincarnation or alien presences or being a so-called star child or stuff like that. There's become an overlap between those ideologies and alt-right ideologies and conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and I think that's really not very hard to spot at all. If you travel among crunchy folks, as I have done somewhat in my past, people I bumped into and stuff, there is a lot of conspiratorial thinking about, especially about Big Pharma. I think that's really where it branches out. You think that Big Pharma is trying to do bad stuff to us for their own profit. Hey, which maybe like reality is complex, and I do think that folks in Big Pharma are trying to get all the money they can, but also I think that if it weren't for them, I'd be dead. So,
Yeah, it's really complicated. That's the thing. Some of the things that people say about, for example, Big Pharma, like, for example, insulin prices in America, or there are things that big pharmaceutical companies do, or that like their business end of them, like their research end, do that are harmful to the global society. The conspiracy theories tend to go a bit further and say things like they're intentionally putting like chips into the vaccines and mind controlling us, like taking it like a step further and be like, no. They can be shitty in more boring ways. Like sure. It doesn't have to be like sci-fi, like X-Files. They can be shitty, and there might be alternatives that don't involve rejecting everything as not true. And yeah.
So I've seen crunchy to alt-right pipeline. I've also seen the crunchy to conspiracy pipeline. Anyway, let's go on to our next one.
Yes.
This one's there's a couple from Diego, actually. IJBOL. Idgebol. Had you heard this one?
No, but I see in the run sheet that is a Gen Z thing. And as a desperate millennial who wants to stay hip with Gen Z, it's not that I want to stay young. I want you to understand this. I am proud of my crow's feet.
You just want young people to like you.
I want to be fun and cool forever.
And you can only do that by association with young people if they say you're cool.
They're just a lot of people that are younger than me, and I want all people to think I'm cool. And I think millennials sort of think I'm cool. So I need to conquer the next market, which is Gen Z.
I see. Okay.
So I see here, Gen Z is replacing LOL with a new word, but will never stop Warren. Okay, so IGBOL. So OL might still be something laughing.
Yep, that's what I got.
I just burst out laughing.
Oh, you got it. Okay, I was thinking I just bowled over laughing. Wow, you're much closer to the Gen Z than I am.
No, burst out laughing is not a new expression.
No, goes back a long way. But this abbreviation is, and there's an article by Heather Schwedel in Slate called RIP LOL. You're still feeling good about this. Okay, good. I'm going to let you have this one.
I'm gonna write on this all day.
Heather Schwedel says the longtime default phrase for online laughter, LOL, short for duh, laughing out loud, may be on its way out as a new abbreviation for communicating hysterics comes to the fore. Idgebol originated in K-pop communities, where it was mistaken for a Korean thing because lots of words in Korean end in bol. Huh. But Idgebol is not. It is just an acronym. I just burst out laughing.
Huh. Yeah.
Which in time will not mean that. You'll be able to say it with a straight face, just like lol.
Can I also encourage all the Swedish speakers in the audience that we should bring back ASG?
What's ASG?
Which is what we had before lol colonized everything. ASG is skarva, which means to laugh a lot. And it used to be the standard default abbreviation in Swedish for laughing, and now people write lol in Swedish, and we should write ASG again.
Okay, I'm going to do that from now on, and I'm going to explain it every time.
No, you don't have to.
Well, what can I do? I want to throw my support behind this.
Death
to lol. Let's kick its corpse on the way out. Next one from Diego. Hurricane.
Oh no, is it a hurricane and an earthquake?
It is, which makes me think, what the heck is going on in California? Seems that Ventura and Los Angeles County got their first tropical storm in more than 80 years, and at the same time, a magnitude 5.1 earthquake, which is kind of big.
Fuck.
Yep.
That's not fun. I'm sorry for everyone who experienced that.
Yeah, me too. But it is nice that quake, lends itself so well. I was thinking we could come up with other weather portmanteaus.
Yeah.
Like a hurranami, or a hurricano, or anything with nami, or anything with kano.
How do you feel about NATO quake?
NATO quake. It's raising tremors because...
Quake NATO?
Quake NATO. That's better. That's better. Because I feel like NATO belongs at the end. If you start lopping it off and stick it into the beginning, it's going to cause confusion. And we don't need that.
Okay.
But Quake you can stick anywhere.
Okay. Quake NATO.
Quake-a-cane. Yep.
Quake.
I like it.
Okay. All right.
You could even have a pan-cyclone... Psychnami. I wanted to get cyclone in there, but it's not working. Pan-huranami.
I think we put a lid on this now and feel sorry for everyone experiencing it.
Yeah, we hope everybody stays safe out there. And now, our last one from the Sandman.
Mm-hmm.
He's given us the ungus productive suffix. And Sandman of Sandman Stories has showed a meme on our Discord channel. Memes where the joke is the suffix ungus. Here are some items. Among Us. Chungus. This is one that I have seen. If you got a cat that's really huge, that's a big chungus there. There's Blongus and Clampong. You fool, you Blongus, you absolute utter Clampongus. It just means anything kind of big. So thoughts?
I never heard about it, but
never heard Chungus. Okay.
Chungus I've heard.
Okay. I think we have to go back to the source here. Humongous, of course. But where does that come from? All the sources I'm seeing say it's something like a mashup of huge and monstrous.
Oh.
I'm not sure if monstrous is the best choice here. I feel like enormous is more likely than monstrous. Humongous, enormous. We also have ginormous and even huenormous can be found.
Mm-hmm.
But the humongous, I think, is where we get our ungus suffix from, and now it's being picked up and applied to lots of things, and it's very suggestive of an absolute unit. Yep. So we'll be watching out for that one. So, pipeline, idgebowl, hurricane, and ungus, the productive suffix, our words of the week.
Pew, pew, pew!
Big thanks to Dr. Jenni Nuttall, everyone who gave us ideas for this episode, the team from Speech Docs for transcribing our words, and most of all, our patrons who keep us going. Thanks, everybody. We're just thankful for everyone who listens to us. It's great to be in your ears. But if you want to help us and promote us, here are some things you can do. You can give us ideas and feedback. We're Because Lang Pod everywhere, including Blue Sky. You can send us ideas and feedback through email, hello@becauselanguage.com. Why not send us your voice? Just make a recording. We'll put it on if it's of good quality. SpeakPipe is a good way to do that. That's on our website, becauselanguage.com. Another way you can help us out is by telling friends about us. We rely on word of mouth and reviews that people leave in reviewy places. Hedvig, did you know that we have a new review?
I see it in the run sheet. I didn't know it before then.
Do you want to read it?
Okay, I'll read it. Okay, we have a new review from Tigger04, and they say, a real gem, 5 stars. And then comes a review. I found myself quadriplegic in hospital bed staring at the ceiling for 7 months. So if I understand correctly, that means that 4 limbs are not possible to use?
That is the definition of quadriplegic. Yikes.
Okay.
Wow, Tigger.
That sounds rough. I hope you're okay. 7 months staring at the ceiling. This is one of a handful of podcasts that kept me sane. I'm feeling a lot of things. The chemistry between the hosts, the deep knowledge, and how they make it accessible to an armchair linguist like me, I'm always learning something new. This one is a gem. Long may it continue.
That's amazing.
As a person who rely on podcasts to make me feel sane, it feels like a great honor to be able to do that for anyone else.
Isn't it?
I know what an enormous part of my life those podcasts are. And to be that for someone else is just, wow.
Yeah, it's humongous.
We hope you're okay. We hope you're not staring at the ceiling in a hospital bed anymore, but if you are, we're here with you.
The idea that it was for 7 months implies that it's ended, so I'm really glad to hear that, and I hope that you're okay. And Tigger, thank you for writing a review for us. We're really glad that you enjoy the show and that we have chemistry. Hedvig, we got chemistry. How about that?
I'm trying to think of how I can not have chemistry to make it funny, but I don't know. What do you do? How about that? Yes, how about that? That's the best non-chemistry I can do.
Yeah, that was very chemical.
I'm contrarian, you know this.
Yeah, no, you're not. So, if you do a review for us, we will find it and we'll read it, if it's good. Another thing you can do to help us is consider becoming a patron. You'll be helping us to pay the bills and transcribe our shows so that they are readable and searchable. Which of the three of us, Ben, Hedvig, or me, is most likely to say humongous during a show? Now you can look it up. If you're a patron, depending on your level, you'll get bonus episodes, mail-outs, shout-outs, and all of our patrons get to come to live episodes and hang out with us on our Discord server, which is very special.
And coming up on our episode, we'll be inviting all of our patrons, and especially we'll be inviting our top patrons, and I'm going to say who they are. So this is our invite list for the next potluck episode.
Okay.
Plus some more folks. Istin, Termi, Elias, Matt, Whitney, Helen, Jack, Ferricat, Lord Mortis, Grandma Jan, Larry, Christopher, Andy, James, Nigel, Meredith, Kate, Nasrin, Joanna, Nikolai, Keith, Aisha, Steele, Margaret, Manu, Roger, Rianne, Colleen, Ignacio, Sonic, Snedgehog, Kevin, Jeff, Andy from Logophilius, Stan, Kathy, Rosh, Cheyenne, Felicity, Amir, Canny Archer, O'Tim, Alyssa, Chris, Laurie, Angry Balls, Tig, and Lewis. And we have a couple of new people who have joined us at the listener level and taken out yearly membership, not just monthly, which is a thing you can do. They are Braun and Li Xian. Thank you to all of our generous patrons.
By the way, that's kind of amazing that you can do yearly patron memberships now. And you will save a little bit of money by doing so, but also you're showing your confidence in us that we will keep doing this for another year. Mm-hmm. I can personally guarantee that I'll be still doing this until they carry me out of my pantry where I record from. We're just going to keep banging out shows as much as we can. Me
too. I'm looking forward to many more years.
Me too.
Thank you to all of our generous patrons. Our theme music was written and performed by Driv Krapianov, who is also a member of Ryan Bino and Didion's Bible. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time, because language. Pew, pew. Did I do everyone's name correctly?
Everyone's name was very correctly.
Very good.
Okay, I'm going to tell you another story.
Yes.
About a smart programming thing I did. I used to work at WordPerfect in another life.
Uh-huh. What did they do?
I did tech support. I help people with their paragraphs and their outlines.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Okay.
And the WordPerfect macro programming language was my first sort of scripting language that I ever did.
Uh-huh.
WordPerfect macros. And we used to write these macros and then sort of unleash them onto customers to help them. And I was carpooling one day with Dave, one of the other tech support guys, and he said, I'm working on this script, this macro, to change outline numbers, the automatic kind, into ones, twos, and threes, and A, B's, and C's, actual text.
Okay.
And I said, well, that's pretty straightforward because there's a command where you can take an automatic thing and turn it into its letter or number equivalent as text. That's a thing that you can do. He says, yeah, I know. But when I change 1 into an actual text number 1, all the other automatic outlines further down change. The one that was 2,
I see, becomes 1.
Now becomes a 1.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He says, I can't figure out a way around it.
I have an idea.
Did you come up with the thing I came up with? What's your idea?
You just add +1 as you're looping through it.
You could. That would be I don't know if the WordPerfect macro programming language had that functionality. Tell you what I told him.
Okay.
I said, why don't you just go through the document backwards?
Oh, that is smarter. I didn't know that was a possibility.
Yep. You can find the previous item. So he said, yep, that was it. And so it worked.
That is
so
smart.
that's the second smartest programming thing I've ever done.
I think the thing in the secret Patreon episode was still smarter. But anyway, that is this is not the podcast of Daniel and Hedvig relationship advice, or nor the programming endeavors.